Hi, my name is Ville. I am the co-creator of the Gilded Gob, the board game. Welcome to this video tutorial where you'll learn everything there is to know about the Gilded Gob. However, before we dive any further, let's first cover the basics.
The Gilded Gob is a 2 to 4 player competitive board game that combines build crafting with strategic player versus player combat. A typical playthrough lasts between 90 and 120 minutes depending on the number of players. The game is divided into two main phases: the city phase, where players assemble a team of fighters and a hand of artifacts, and the combat phase, where those teams clash in tactical combat. The goal of the game is simple: be the last player standing to claim victory in the tournament.
If you are new to the game, we recommend watching the whole video from beginning to the end. If, however, you are a more seasoned player, you can skip ahead to specific sections using the timestamps provided throughout the video. Without further ado, let's move on to the city phase.
Position the city map in the center of the table. Place the faction quarter markers in their designated district spaces on the city map, reward side up. Each faction is represented by 3 markers. Place the trainer and smith markers in their designated district spaces with the closed side face up. There are 2 trainers and 2 smiths in total. Finally, place the 8 contract markers in their designated district spaces. The game box includes 3 types of cards: faction cards, events, and contracts. Shuffle all card decks separately and place them into their dedicated slots in the game box, facing away from the players. Create the Tavern pile by drawing 2 fighter cards from each faction, shuffling them together and placing the pile face down near the city map. Then create the Merchant pile by drawing 2 artifact cards from each faction, shuffling them together and placing the pile face down next to the Tavern pile. Leave space for the Sewers, which is the discard pile for cards used or lost during the city phase. Each player chooses a player marker and places it on the district space matching their marker's color at the center of the city map. Each player takes a personal coin purse where they store their gold. During setup, players take 3 scoops of gold from the pot, using only one hand. No retries allowed and no picking up fallen pieces. The more gold you scoop, the larger your budget will be during the city phase. And lastly, each player draws 1 random fighter from the Tavern pile, 1 random artifact from the Merchant pile, and 1 contract from the contract deck. During the city phase, all fighter, artifact, and contract cards are kept hidden from other players. With the setup complete, it's time to enter Valoran and begin the city phase. This is Valoran City, the region's capital and the host of the annual Gilded Gob tournament, where arena masters lead their teams into battle with clashing steel and wavering magic. You, as it happens, are a new arena master who has just arrived in the city to register for the tournament. Before the battles can commence, you'll need blades at your side and powerful artifacts in your pocket. To do this, you'll need to traverse the city of Valoran and assemble your team. All players begin their first turn at their designated space on the Gilded Gob arena grounds. Players take turns in clockwise order, exploring the city, visiting points of interest as they go. Who goes first may be decided by any method agreed upon. The city phase lasts for 12 rounds, with each round consisting of 1 full turn for each player. To keep track of the current round, place 1 gold on the round tracker and move it 1 step forward at the start of each new round. During their turn, players must always move their marker, and 2 or more players may share the same district space or point of interest at any given time. To move your player marker, simply follow one of the dotted paths connected to your space. These white dots represent footpaths that can only be traversed by foot. Players may move up to 2 steps by foot during their turn, and this movement resets to 2 at the start of each new turn. Notice that by reaching this district space, we are now connected to a continuous white line running in a circle and sprawling outward into the city. These lines represent roads, which can be traversed by foot, but they also grant access to cards. While standing on a district space that contains a card icon, we can board the card, follow the road, and travel to the next district space with a card icon. Each jump between card icons costs 1 gold and the process can be repeated as many times during a single turn as necessary. However, we cannot stop midway between the card icons. Once we pay, we must always travel all the way to the next available space with a card icon. Because we are complete wastrels, let's board the card 6 more times for a total cost of 6 gold. We still have 1 unspent movement by foot, so let's use it to reach this district space. We have now arrived at the docks, represented by this orange wheel icon. By paying 3 gold, we may move to any other port in the city using the ferry, the second form of fast travel. The Cloudway is the third and final form of fast travel, and it behaves exactly like the ferry. Once you reach a district space with a blue wheel icon, you may instantly move to another district space with a similar icon, again for a cost of 3 gold. During their turn, players may combine any form of fast travel with movement by foot in any order. Red dashed lines represent the back alleys, risky shortcuts through Valoron's back streets. A back alley can only be entered or exited at its marked endpoints, and can only be accessed by foot. Using a back alley can save you time, trouble, and even gold, but it can also bite you in the ass, and here's why. Before moving your player marker across the alley, you must first perform a back alley check. At this point, you don't yet know whether crossing the alley will succeed or fail, but your movement by foot has already been spent on the attempt. Draw 1 card from the back alley deck and resolve the effect written on the card. The outcomes range from harmless to severe. In this example, the player is granted safe passage and continues their turn from the alley's endpoint as normal. Now that we know how to move around the city of Valoron, let's take a look at what the city has to offer. During the city phase, your number 1 goal is to collect a pool of fighter and artifact cards from which you build your tournament team and strategy. Valoron is home to 8 factions, each with their own fighters, artifacts, gameplay style, and backstory. There are a total of 96 unique faction cards in the game, ensuring that each playthrough feels different and offers new tools to achieve victory. The 8 factions are Legion, excelling at stability and defense; the Vagrants, relying on cunning tools and dice luck; the Clergy of Dawn, specializing in support mechanics such as resurrection; the Ashen, thriving on death and sacrifice; the Black Mandible, specializing in counterplay and precision; the Hunter's Guild, known for relentless offense; the Dormant Spire, masters of devastating magic; and the Abyssal Sect, whose playstyle is volatile and wildly unpredictable. The most effective and inexpensive way of collecting faction cards is to visit one of the 24 faction quarters scattered throughout the city. The first visit to each faction quarter grants the reward written on the marker, including 3 different variations: 2 fighter cards from that faction's pool, 2 artifact cards from that faction's pool, or 1 of each. When you visit a faction quarter, remove the marker from the city map and draw the reward specified on the marker from the correct faction deck within the game box. These rewards are always hidden from other players. Entering a faction quarter and claiming its reward always ends your turn, even if you still have movement remaining. Once a faction quarter has been claimed, future visits no longer grant rewards, as the marker is removed and replaced by a regular district space. Besides faction quarters, the city offers another reliable way to acquire faction cards. Taverns and merchants sell faction cards in exchange for gold. Each of the 4 districts contains 1 tavern and 1 merchant, and each location grants access to the shared tavern pile and merchant pile respectively. When visiting a tavern or merchant, draw the top card from the corresponding pile without revealing it to other players. You may then choose to purchase the card for a fixed cost: 6 gold for a fighter card, 4 gold for an artifact card. If you choose not to purchase the card, simply return it face down to the top of the pile. If you do purchase the card, add it to your card pool. You may then immediately draw another card from the same pile and repeat the process for as long as you can afford it. Drawing from the tavern or merchant pile always ends your turn, even if you still had movement remaining. It is also possible for either or both of the piles to run out of cards. Once depleted, these piles are not refilled and remain empty for the rest of the city phase. All faction cards in the Gilded Gob are double-sided and feature 2 versions of the card, a base version and an upgraded version. Normally, cards are added to your pool in their base state, with one exception that we will cover later in the video. On the base side, a small icon indicates which attribute will improve when the card is upgraded. On the upgraded side, the improvement is printed directly onto the card, alongside a larger upgrade icon next to the card's name, making it easy to distinguish upgraded cards from their base versions. To manually upgrade a faction card, players must visit the trainer for fighter upgrades or the smith for artifact upgrades. There are 2 trainers and 2 smiths in the city. However, these locations are only accessible temporarily through district events. Once an event opens one of these locations to the public, its marker is flipped to show open, and the corresponding district space turns purple. Once the trainer or smith becomes available, only the first player to reach the location gets to upgrade a card. Once a player uses the trainer or smith, that location's marker is removed from the map, and a regular district space appears in its place. At the trainer, the player may upgrade 1 fighter card in their card pool for a cost of 6 gold. At the smith, the player may upgrade 1 artifact for a cost of 4 gold. To upgrade a card, simply flip it to reveal its upgraded side. Upgrades are performed without revealing the card to opposing players. And just like other points of interest, interacting with the trainer or smith immediately ends your turn, even if you still have unspent movement by foot. So far, we've discovered what happens when players interact with various locations throughout Valoran, and the different ways to travel between these locations. But what happens when a player ends their turn in a district space instead? Let's uncover that next. When a player ends their turn in a district space, rather than at a point of interest, they draw a district event card from the corresponding event deck. District events can affect players in unpredictable ways, from gold gambled and lost to gaining additional movement during a turn. After drawing a district event, read the bolded text out loud and resolve its effect. Each card also includes optional flavor text to bring the event to life. In this example from the Crown's Reach event deck, the player gets to move 1 additional step by foot. Once a district event has been resolved, it is placed in the sewers, which acts as the discard pile for used cards during the city phase. We won't spoil the fun by listing every event, but there is one type we need to examine more closely: bid events. These events engage all players, not just the one who drew the card. Bid events are the third and final means of acquiring faction cards, but with a major twist. They are public, meaning all players get to participate, and the reward is an already upgraded faction card. Bid events are always triggered by one of 2 cards: Fighter for Hire, which initiates a bid for a fighter card, and Artifact for Auction, which does the same for artifacts. Bid events also display a faction symbol indicating from which faction deck the card is drawn for bidding. Once a player draws a bid event card, they draw 1 card from the game box matching the card type and faction symbol shown on the event card. Before revealing it, the player flips the card to its upgraded side and then places it face up for all players to see. Now, the bidding begins. The player who drew the event opens the bidding, starting at 1 gold or higher. They may call any price they can afford. The bid then proceeds clockwise, with each player either raising the bid or passing. Once a player passes, they may no longer rejoin the bidding. When all but 1 player has passed, the highest bidder pays the gold and immediately claims the upgraded card. While exploring Valoran, players may cross paths with contract markers, which were placed throughout the city during setup. Contracts represent secret bounties, favors, and special deals. Unlike events, contracts remain hidden in a player's hand until they choose to resolve them. Once a player passes over or ends their movement on a contract marker, they immediately draw 1 card from the contract deck. Once a contract has been drawn, the contract marker is removed from the city map, and that space will no longer grant contract rewards for the remainder of the city phase. Picking up a contract does not end the player's movement. Contract spaces behave like any other district space. This means that ending your turn on one will always trigger a district event from the matching district deck, whether the marker has already been claimed or not. Contracts may grant free upgrades, discounts, or even ways to interfere with rival players. Each contract has a specific condition that determines when its effect may be resolved. Some contracts also require gold to use, represented by a coin symbol with a number inside. For example, the Scout contract allows a player to snatch a fighter during a Fighter for Hire bid event at a small fee of 2 gold. Once the required conditions are met and a contract is used, the player reveals the card to the other players, resolves the effect, and then places the used contract into the sewers. Contracts do not carry over into the combat phase, so there is little reason to hold on to them once an opportunity to use them arises. Not every venture through Valoron ends well. Sometimes fortune turns against you during a back alley check, and that's where the Hospice and the dungeon come into play. Once a card sends a player to either location, their player marker is moved there immediately, ending their turn. A player may also be sent to the Hospice or dungeon outside of their own turn. Regardless of when this happens, they may resume moving normally at the start of their next turn. As long as all players agree, faction cards, contracts, gold, and even vague promises can be traded among players. When the 12th and final round ends, the city phase concludes. At this point, all contracts expire. Their effects no longer apply once the city phase ends, and the cards may be moved into the sewers. Gold, however, still matters as it determines the turn order of the combat phase, so keep your coin purse close to your chest. You may now remove the city map and all city components to make room for the combat setup. Finally, it is time to build your team. From all the faction cards acquired during the city phase, each player now constructs a team of up to 6 fighter cards and a hand of up to 6 artifact cards. Players may never exceed these limits, but depending on the outcome of the city phase, they may end up with fewer cards. Once ready, keep the selected cards as well as the remaining unused cards in the card pool hidden from the other players. Depending on the game mode and number of players, you may still revisit your unused card pool between or even during battles, so do not return any unused faction cards to the game box.
The city phase may be over, but the struggle for victory has only just begun. Next, we'll prepare the battlefield for the combat phase.
Each player takes a combat platform and places it in front of them. Each player takes a green command marker and places it on their command tracker to 0. Place the standard D4 and D6 dice, the custom defense dice, as well as the injury markers within reach of all players. Each player should also have the fighters and artifacts they selected at the end of the city phase readily available. The combat platform consists of 3 parts. The formation, the large triangular area in the center. This is where your fighters are deployed and battle takes place. 2 artifact slots where artifact cards are played and tracked, and the command tracker used to track the player's actions during combat. The formation consists of 6 slots, and each slot may hold 1 fighter at any given time, thus the limitation of 6 fighters in a team. The player with the most coin in their pouch decides who takes the first turn. Before the coin check, however, all players place their fighters face down onto their formation slots. Once all players are ready, the fighter cards are flipped and revealed. Each of the 48 unique fighter cards follow a consistent layout. Once you learn how to read one, you know how to read them all. Every fighter has a unique name, displayed at the top of the card. Each fighter belongs to one of 6 classes: Warrior, Skirmisher, Rogue, Archer, Mystic, or Sorcerer. A fighter's class determines the attribute values printed on the card. The easiest way to distinguish between classes is the card's color scheme. Each fighter also belongs to one of 8 factions, represented by the faction seal in the upper left corner of the card. The bottom portion of the card is reserved for that fighter's special ability. Every fighter has a unique ability that sets them apart from the rest, including other fighters of the same class. Each fighter class has a fixed attribute that improves when upgraded, indicated by the upgrade icon on the card. For example, all warriors gain 1 additional health when upgraded. Each fighter also includes a separate info card, found by pulling the card from its sleeve. The info card explains the fighter's ability in greater detail and contains lore text, offering a glimpse into the fighter's background and story. Back on the fighter card, the right side displays the fighter's offensive attributes: damage, weapon type, and reach. Damage simply determines how much damage the fighter deals with its attacks. Weapon type, shown as a sword, bow, or staff icon, determines whether the fighter uses a melee, ranged, or magical weapon. Weapon type influences how enemies react to the fighter's actions and vice versa. Reach determines how deep into the enemy formation a fighter can strike. And finally, Sneak, shown as a white dagger icon. This attribute is present only on rogues. Sneak allows rogues to bypass certain enemies when calculating reach, letting them strike even deeper into the enemy formation. The left side of the card displays the fighter's defensive attributes: defense, armor, and health. Defense determines which types of enemy attacks the fighter defends against, using the same sword, bow, and staff symbols as the weapon type. It also indicates which class die the fighter uses when rolling defense. Armor determines how much damage must be dealt in a single hit to overwhelm the fighter and breach their defenses. Health determines how much damage a fighter can endure after their armor has been breached before they are killed. Next, we'll explore fighter attributes and abilities in greater detail using actual combat examples. As the Arena Master, you command your fighters to act. However, only active fighters can perform actions, pun intended. A fighter is considered active when they are upright from the player's perspective. Active is one of the 3 stances a fighter can be in, while a fighter's stance is the strongest indicator of their combat readiness and defensive capabilities. One of the most important actions you can command a fighter to perform is an attack. When a fighter attacks, they deal their printed damage value to a chosen enemy fighter within their reach. Reach determines how many enemy fighters may stand between the attacker and their target. When calculating reach, only the enemy formation matters. It does not matter how many of your own fighters stand between the attacking fighter and the enemy target. Let's look at an example. If I command my warrior to attack, I'd have no choice but to target the enemy fighter in slot 1. With a reach of 0, warriors can only attack the first available target or targets. If I were to use my archer instead, I could attack the fighters in slots 1, 2, or 3. With 1 reach, the archer can attack past 1 enemy fighter. Now, using my sorcerer here, I could attack any fighter in slots 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6. With 2 reach, the sorcerer can attack past 2 enemy fighters. With reach and targeting rules in mind, which fighter should I use if I wanted to harm the enemy fighter in slot 1? I could use my warrior since the enemy is within reach, but if we compare the warrior's damage value to the enemy fighter's armor value, we can see that the attack is not strong enough to breach their armor. Such an attack would achieve nothing offensively. Instead, let's use our skirmisher. With 3 damage, the skirmisher is capable of breaching the enemy fighter's armor in a single hit. When a fighter attacks, we turn their card sideways, indicating that they have acted. A fighter who has acted becomes passive. Each time we command a fighter to act, we spend command from our command pool. Because command is limited, players can only perform a finite number of actions each turn. Now that our attack has been declared, the defending fighter has an opportunity to react. First, we check whether the defending fighter is in active stance. Only active fighters have a chance of defending against attacks. Next, we compare the weapon types of both fighters. Our skirmisher is using a melee weapon, while the defending fighter is capable of defending against melee attacks, both indicated by the sword icons. Since both the stance and weapon type conditions are met, the attack results in a defense roll, which is carried out by the defending player. Each of the 6 fighter classes uses a unique defense die. In this case, the defending player uses a brown d10, which is the warrior class die. Regardless of which defense die is used, the results fall into 4 main categories. Miss. The defending fighter fails to react in time, and the attack hits without resistance. Block. The attack is fully negated. The defending fighter becomes passive. Dodge. The attack is fully negated. The defending fighter remains active. Retaliation. The attack hits as normal, but the defending fighter also strikes back. Let's see what the dice have in store for us today. The opposing player rolls defense, resulting in 3 retaliation damage. Whenever we resolve damage calculations such as this attack, both players become locked into the offensive action. During the offensive action, no other actions may take place. For example, I could not attack with another fighter until the current offensive action has been fully resolved. When resolving an offensive action, we always carry out the effects in the defending player's formation first, followed by the effects in the active player's formation. Our skirmisher deals 3 damage to the enemy warrior, which is enough to breach their armor. Whenever a fighter receives damage equal to or greater than their armor value, they become downed and are turned upside down. Downed fighters are at their most vulnerable because they are no longer protected by their armor, and any further damage they receive is dealt directly to their health. With the defending player's effect resolved, let's move on to our formation. The enemy's defense roll resulted in 3 retaliation damage, which is now suffered by our attacking skirmisher. Although the skirmisher became passive after initiating the attack, fighters in a passive stance are still fully protected by their armor. However, the retaliation damage is greater than our armor value, causing the skirmisher to become downed as well. Because the retaliation damage exceeded our armor value, the excess damage reaches our health. Whenever a fighter takes damage directly to their health, they suffer injuries. The number of injuries suffered is equal to the amount of damage dealt to health. In this case, 1 damage for 1 injury. Now, for the remainder of combat, unless I can somehow remove that injury, my skirmisher has 1 less health than what is printed on the card. Since we managed to down that enemy warrior, it would be sensible to finish what we started. Most of our remaining active fighters have enough damage to finish the enemy fighter, but let's use our warrior here. This offensive action is much simpler. The enemy fighter is downed, unable to defend against attacks, and no longer protected by their armor. My warrior's attack damage is enough to reduce the enemy fighter's health total to 0. In this case, we won't be using injury markers, as the damage is enough to kill the fighter outright. My opponent now removes the fallen fighter from the formation and discards the card. Before we finish our turn, we might want to improve our position here. Currently, our skirmisher is downed, unprotected by their armor, and with only 1 health remaining, an easy target for my opponent to finish off. Luckily, during my turn, I can command my fighters to recover, changing their stance 1 step toward being active. To recover a fighter, I simply choose any non-active fighter, spend 1 command from my pool, and rotate the card 1 step toward active stance. Lastly, I noticed I made a slight mistake with my positioning here before attacking with my warrior. My warrior has a base armor value of 3 compared to my rogue's armor of 2, so I may want to switch their positions. I begin by commanding my warrior to recover, spending 1 command and changing their stance 1 step toward active. Now, moving fighters is simple. You may move any active fighter any number of times during your turn, and movement does not cost command. I could move my warrior to any unoccupied slot in my formation, or switch places with another active fighter, which is exactly what I'll do here. Let's imagine our opponent was so impressed by our genius tactics that they didn't act at all during their turn. So this is where we left off. We have taken notice of a potentially game-changing sorcerer in the enemy formation occupying slot 4, a fighter we'd much rather see dead. Let's set ourselves a challenge and use our rogue to finish this target. However, the rogue's reach and damage are currently insufficient to get the job done. Let's start by commanding our archer to attack the enemy fighter in slot 2. 2 damage is enough to breach the enemy's armor, causing them to become downed. No defense roll occurs here, as the defending fighter can only defend against melee attacks, while our archer is using a ranged weapon. With the enemy fighter now downed, our rogue can benefit from sneak, ignoring passive and downed enemy fighters when calculating reach. However, they still lack the damage needed to finish the target in a single swing. We could simply attack the target twice, just as we did with the enemy warrior earlier, but instead let's use this opportunity to demonstrate another important combat mechanic. Besides moving and attacking, all active fighters can focus. When you command a fighter to focus, they become passive, you spend 1 command, and the fighter gains 1 focus, represented by a yellow d4 die. The d4 die sets a limitation. 1 fighter can only hold up to 4 focus at any given time. Focus is a fighter-bound resource that can be used to strengthen that fighter's attacks. In addition, some fighter abilities require spending focus to use them, while others become active simply by holding focus. We'll take a closer look at abilities shortly. Before I can use my rogue to attack, I first need to recover them back to active stance. Now, let's annihilate the enemy sorcerer. I command my rogue to attack and spend 1 focus to strengthen it. Each focus spent increases the attack's damage by 1. In this case, my rogue's attack deals 2 + 1, 3 damage in total. Once again, both players become locked into the offensive action, starting with the defending player. The enemy sorcerer is active and capable of rolling defense against all weapon types, so they roll their class defense die. The result is 1 retaliation damage. Lucky for us, not even enough to breach our rogue's armor. However, our opponent isn't satisfied with the result and chooses to reroll the die. In the Gilded Gob, you may reroll any of your own dice, even outside of your own turn. Each reroll costs 1 command per die rerolled, and any die may be rerolled multiple times. The reroll pays off. The opponent now rolls a block, completely negating our attack. With a block result, the defending fighter becomes passive and the offensive action ends abruptly. Now that we know the basics of how fighters operate and which actions we can command them to perform, let's get to the good stuff: fighter abilities. Fighter abilities come in 3 forms: ability attacks, skills, and traits. Ability attacks and skills follow the same basic rules as attacking and focusing. A fighter must be active to use an ability attack or skill, the action costs 1 command, and the fighter becomes passive. Traits, on the other hand, are passive effects that continuously wait for the right conditions to trigger their effect. Let's examine each ability type more closely. By default, ability attacks follow the same targeting rules, deal the same damage, and use the same weapon type as that fighter's standard attacks. However, anything written in the ability attack's description can override these rules. For example, Kill Chop deals 6 damage to an enemy fighter within reach. The description overrides the skirmisher's base damage value of 3, but it still follows the standard reach rules and uses that fighter's weapon type for the attack. Notice the yellow sphere next to the ability's name. To use this ability attack, the fighter must spend 1 focus as part of the cost. Ability attacks can be strengthened just like standard attacks. After paying any focus required by the ability itself, you may spend additional focus to increase the attack's damage by 1 per focus spent. Skills are versatile tools. They can be offensive, dealing damage to 1 or even multiple fighters in the enemy formation. They can also provide utility and battlefield control, removing injuries, resurrecting fallen fighters, or stripping enemy fighters of focus. Because skills come in many different forms, their effects are always determined by the description printed on the fighter card. However, all skills follow a few important rules. Skills can never be defended against. Even if a skill deals damage to an enemy fighter, they can never roll defense. Unlike attacks, skills cannot be strengthened by spending additional focus. Skills always use the fighter's weapon type. This is important because some effects provide immunity against specific weapon types. Always follow the description printed on the fighter card. A skill may be limited by reach, use a specific roll type, or include additional rules unique to that skill. Traits are passive abilities, waiting for the right conditions to trigger their effect. Some traits enhance damage, some offer additional armor, while others trigger upon death or a scored kill. Some traits have an additional requirement. The fighter must be focused for the trait to function. A fighter is considered focused while they hold at least 1 focus. This condition is indicated both by the ability symbol and within the ability description. Alright, let's reset both formations from our previous example. This time, let's make use of our fighter's abilities. I've taken the liberty of already adding 1 focus to our skirmisher here. Other than that, we have the exact same setup as before. Let's start by commanding our Troll Slayer to use their Kill Chop ability attack. They become passive and spend 1 focus to pay the ability's cost. We spend 1 command, declare a target within reach, and attack the enemy warrior in slot 1. The opponent rolls defense. The result is a retaliation of 4. As always, effects are resolved in the defending player's formation first. The 6 damage from Kill Chop is enough to both breach the fighter's armor and reduce their health to 0. Whenever a single source of damage is enough to kill a fighter outright, the fighter does not first become downed and then die, they are simply removed from the formation immediately. With that resolved, we now apply the 4 retaliation damage to our Troll Slayer. The same rule applies here. 4 retaliation damage is enough to kill the Troll Slayer outright, so they are immediately removed from the formation. Next, let's use our Sorcerer and command them to attack the enemy fighter in slot 3. The defending fighter can only defend against melee and ranged attacks, not magical attacks, so no defense roll occurs here. 1 damage is enough to breach the fighter's armor, causing them to become downed. Next, we'll use Jab's stun shot to stagger an enemy fighter within Jab's reach. We select the fighter in slot 6, causing their stance to shift from active to passive. Because stun shot is a skill, the defending fighter cannot roll defense against it, even if the weapon types match. Now, let's utilize Sneak and Black Mantis' trait Laid in Blood. Using Sneak, we can bypass the downed enemy fighter in slot 3 and reach the enemy fighter in slot 6. Laid in Blood increases Black Mantis' attack damage against passive and downed enemies by 1, allowing her to deal a total of 2 + 1, 3 damage to the target. 3 damage is enough to kill the fighter outright, and no defense roll occurs because the enemy is in passive stance. At this point, we have a solid understanding of fighter actions and fighter abilities. Now, let's introduce artifacts into the mix. Unlike fighters, which are visible to all players at all times, artifacts are the secret weapons you deploy onto the battlefield when the time is right. Artifacts remain tucked away in the player's hand until they are played and revealed. Artifacts come in 2 types: timed artifacts, which remain in play for a fixed number of turns, and charged artifacts, which contain a set number of charges. Just like fighter cards, each artifact has a unique name displayed at the top of the card, as well as a faction seal indicating its faction origin. All artifacts have the following attributes. Cost, indicated by the number inside a green sphere. Playing an artifact from your hand costs as much command as indicated by the cost. Duration or charges, depending on the artifact type. The number shown indicates either how many player turns the artifact remains active or how many times its effect can be triggered. And of course, the description box displays the artifact's unique effect. Playing an artifact is simple. Choose an artifact from your hand, pay its command cost, and place the artifact in a free artifact slot on your combat platform. When an artifact is played, align its pointer with the starting duration or charges indicated on the card. As the artifact's duration or charges diminishes, use the rotating counter to track how much juice is left in the artifact. Adjusting an artifact's duration or spending a charge never costs command. The cost is paid only once when the artifact enters play. As described earlier, timed artifacts remain in play for a set number of turns, turns referring to the controlling player's own turns. Timed artifacts either produce their effect continuously while they have at least 1 duration remaining, or trigger a one-time effect the moment the artifact reaches 0 duration. Unlike timed artifacts, charged artifacts are not tied to player turns. Instead, they are equipped with charges, each charge yielding the effect described on the card. Charges can only be used during the player's turn. When you use a charge, simply rotate the card's pointer to show the number of remaining charges. Artifacts can be removed from their artifact slot at any point during your turn, even if they still have duration or charges remaining. Conversely, an artifact that has reached 0 duration or charges may remain in its artifact slot until the player needs to make room for another artifact. Removing an artifact costs no command. When an artifact is removed, place it in your discard pile. Let's return both formations to full strength and introduce a few artifacts into the mix. Our opponent has Kill Contract in their artifact slot, ominously waiting to trigger at the start of their next turn. We will pull an ace from our sleeve and play Bulwark of Kings, granting our fighters complete immunity to melee and ranged weapon types. This immunity applies to damage, skills, and most importantly, in this example, artifact effects. We will continue by playing Trollblood and immediately spending a charge to bolster our skirmisher's attack. With the additional damage, our standard attack now deals 5 damage in total, enough to kill the enemy warrior in a single swing. The enemy rolls defense, resulting in 3 retaliation damage. However, Bulwark of Kings grants immunity against melee weapon types, making our skirmisher completely immune to the retaliation damage. The retaliation is ignored, and our skirmisher remains unharmed. I will end my turn here, knowing that the opposing player cannot benefit from kill contract or harm any of my fighters using melee or ranged effects. Before we wrap up the combat phase with turn structure and game modes, let's take a brief look at 2 special roll types, target rolls and chain rolls. Target rolls are exactly what they sound like. They determine 1 or more random targets to which an effect is applied. Target rolls are carried out using d6s. Each die result corresponds to a slot number, and the card's effect is applied to that slot. These effects are resolved in slot order, starting with the lowest number. If multiple dice show the same slot number, the effect takes place multiple times, each roll resolved one at a time. Chain rolls determine how effects spread between fighters in neighboring slots. To perform a chain roll, roll a d4 and compare the result to the d4 symbols surrounding the origin slot. If the result matches one of the symbols, the effect spreads to that neighboring slot. Resolve each roll one at a time. If the slot is empty, the effect is ignored. Combat in the Gilded Gob takes place over a series of turns, with each player taking 1 full turn at a time. During your turn, you may command your fighters, play artifacts, and adjust your formation in the order of your choosing. However, each turn begins with a fixed set of actions. Command Restock. Restock your command pool. The amount of command gained increases after every player turn, with the first player starting at 1 command, the second at 2, and so forth. Once the restock reaches 4 command, it no longer increases, and all players restock 4 command for the remainder of the combat. Fighter check. Recover all of your uninjured fighters, shifting their stance 1 step toward being active. This action is automatic and costs no command. Artifact check. Rotate your timed artifacts 1 step toward 0 duration. If an artifact triggers when it reaches 0 duration, resolve that effect now. Once these steps are complete, you may begin your turn. You may end your turn at any point, passing play to the next player in clockwise order. You are not required to spend all or even any of your command during your turn. Any unspent command remains in your tracker. However, players may never hold more than 6 command. If a command restock would increase your command above 6, any excess is lost. Combat concludes once only 1 player has fighters remaining in their formation. The combat phase adapts to the number of players, whether you're playing with 2, 3, or 4 people. With 2 players, combat is resolved as a standard duel. With 3 players, combat is fought as a free-for-all, where every player is on their own. With 4 players, you may choose between 2 game modes. A tournament format where 2 duels take place simultaneously. The winners advance to the final duel, while the losers face each other to avoid finishing last. Or a 4-player free-for-all, where all players compete in a single battle. Thank you for watching the video. We hope to see you again in the Gilded Gob.